Hello, friend. Welcome back. You've landed on CouchTales. I'm your host, Analia. And today we're talking about something we all do, talking to ourselves. But before we dig in, gentle reminder that this is for fun and not considered professional advice. Today's episode, the voice in your head, friend or foe. Why we have negative self-talk and how to fix it. Would it be a hardship for you to share your experience in the comments? Now you might be thinking, talking to myself? Isn't that just for people who lose their keys? Whether we realize it or not, our inner voice is shaping how we see ourselves in the world. It can be our biggest cheerleader or our worst enemy. So let's dive into a story about how a teenager learned to turn his worst enemy, his own thoughts, into his greatest superpower. The tale of Max, when your brain becomes the bully. Once upon a time, maybe last Tuesday there was a teenager named Max. Max wasn't a superhero, at least not in the traditional sense. He didn't have a cape, but he did have a hoodie that made him feel invincible. Max loved music, video games, and hanging out with his friends. But there was one thing he was really good at, talking himself out of things. His brain was like a relentless commentator, constantly whispering, "You're going to embarrass yourself. You're not smart enough. You're probably going to fail." And the worst part, Max believed it. One day he had a big presentation in class. As the day got closer, his brain turned into an over-caffeinated sports announcer, predicting his downfall. By the time he stood up in class in front of his classmates, his hands were shaking, his knees were weak, and the voice in his head was screaming, "Everyone's watching you. You're going to mess this up. They'll laugh at you." And then bam, his mind went blank. A few students giggled. Max turned red. His worst fear confirmed. The second the bell rang, he bolted out of the room, mumbling to himself, "I suck. I'm never going to do this again." That night, Max vented to his older sister, Mia. After hearing him spiral, Mia leaned back, crossed her arms, and said, "What if your brain is lying to you?" Max frowned. "What do you mean?" Mia smirked. "You're treating every thought as if they are a fact," Mia said. "If you keep telling yourself you're going to fail, of course you're going to feel like a failure. What if you started talking to yourself like a friend instead of an enemy?" Max blinked. "So you're saying I should just lie to myself?" Mia laughed. "No, silly. I'm saying you should challenge those thoughts. Instead of thinking, 'I'm terrible at this,' how about trying, 'I'm learning and I'm doing the best I can and I'll do my best next time.'" Okay, Max wasn't convinced, but he figured he had nothing to lose. So the next time Max had to speak in class, his nerves were still there, but instead of feeding them, he tested out a new strategy. Instead of saying, "I'm going to bomb this," he reframed it with, "I've practiced and I'll do my best." Instead of thinking, "Everyone's judging me," he reframed it with, "Most people are too worried about themselves to care." Instead of thinking, "I can't do this," he reframed it with, "I've done hard things before and I can do this too." And guess what? The presentation wasn't perfect. He still stumbled over a few words, but this time he didn't spiral. He laughed it off and kept going. And his classmates, they didn't burst into laughter. They barely noticed at all. Max realized something huge. The way he talked to himself was more powerful than the situation itself. So why does this work? The psychology behind it. Number one, the negative bias. Your brain's a drama queen. Our brains love to focus on the negative. Evolutionarily, this kept us alive. Our ancestors needed to overanalyze threats like, say, a saber-toothed tiger to survive. But today, that instinct just makes us overthink embarrassing moments that no one else remembers. Number two, self-fulfilling prophecies, when your thoughts become reality. If you tell yourself, "I'm going to fail," you'll feel more anxious, perform worse, and surprise, end up reinforcing your fear. It's like tripping over your own shoelaces because you were too focused on not tripping. Number three, the mind's inner battle. You know the guy who made psychology famous? Well, he believed that our minds have two different voices, one that criticizes us and one that encourages us. The trick is recognizing when your inner critic is running the show and choosing to listen to a different voice. So how do we reframe your inner voice? Want to talk to yourself as a supportive friend instead of a mean internet troll? Try these reframes. When you have the negative thought of, I'm not good enough, here's a reframe. I'm learning and growing every day. Negative thought. I always mess up. Reframe. Mistakes help me improve. Negative thought. Everyone's judging me. Reframe. People are too busy worrying about themselves to focus on you. It takes practice, but the more you do it, the more your brain starts believing it. Max's story isn't just about one bad presentation. It's about how the inner voice in your head can either hold you back or help you grow. So the next time your inner voice tells you that you're not good enough, talk back, challenge it, reframe it. Because the voice in your head, it's yours, and you get to decide whether it lifts you up or tears you down. All right, that's it for today's episode of CouchTales, Why We Do What We Do. I'm your host, Analia, and remember, you're doing better than your brain gives you credit for. Until next time, stay kind, stay curious, and feel free to post on your social media.